Hello, and happy stories to you all. I'm here in a little spinney somewhere on the South Shropshire-Herefordshire border, and I have a tale for you set, a few dozen miles further south in the Wye Valley. It's the ancient legend of King Herla and the Stag Knight from Hell. Now, it used to be commonly believed that humanity becomes more humane as time goes by, that our once brutish tribal behaviour is being slowly educated out of the human species generation by generation. Sometimes a look around you at the woes of the world suggests that this process is proving slower than the ideal. But there have always been people among us who look out for others, and other people who look out mainly or only for themselves. The first type, those who see other human beings, let alone animals, as fellow planet dwellers deserving of the same respect we would wish shown to us. Those people we can label as decent. To know the label we attach to the second type, the selfish, the combative, the proud, simply hit your thumb with a hammer and anything that comes out will probably fit the bill for them. Anyway, there's an archaic yarn from the county of Herefordshire which may tell us something about respecting others. It stars King Herla, who is often called one of the earliest British kings. And in most retellings, that is how he's called, but we now know that we are so long divorced from that old blob of history that this could mean that Herla's ancestors came from pretty much anywhere. Troy, Africa, Belgium, Atlantis, and spilled many a litre of blood to set up this young, strapping Celtic warlord in his own court and castle on the banks of the River Wye. His kingdom secure, Herla had plighted his troth fervently to a disgustingly rich emperor's niece, and the date was set for a wedding so stuffed with pomp Albion would have a hangover for generations. But on his stag night, which in those days often meant actually hunting wild stag in addition to the drink and the damsels and the dancing, Herla and his entourage encountered an extremely charismatic fellow. He could have stood no more than 1 yard tall, with shining cherry ebony skin and a black woolly beard which hung down to his navel. He wore a dazzling coronet and sat perched on a big fat corgi with a shining red nose, who panted happily as his master held his hand to his heart and nodded respectfully to the bridegroom king. "Whoa there, Donach! King Herla of Hereford! I once greet you merrily as King Gwyn ap Nudd. How are you settling into the place, then? I like what you've done with the ramparts up there, nice and notchy." "King of where, little boyo?" chuckled the pickled Herla. "It can't be Britain looking like that." King Gwyn's left cheek twitched a little at this, but he just carried on with a respectful attitude that he already had, and no man there was sober enough to notice. Gwyn ap Nudd decided instead to laugh a booming little laugh. A bit like that. I mean, I wasn't there, but a bit like that. And he went on unabashed. "Oh, I am the king of many lands, brother, and once I was king of this spot right here. Oh, but that was oodles of moons ago. You're quite welcome to the place. I come in peace, King Herla, to bring you wedding gifts and good tidings galore. I, too, am happily jumping off the dock with an absolutely scrumptious fairy princess called Mab sometime next year. You'll be very welcome to come to that, of course." "Well, I don't suppose you'd eat too much, would you?" Herla laughed. "Ha! You're on, Gwyn. It's not a free bar, mind." "Don't you worry, Herla, we can look after ourselves," beamed Gwyn, and gestured the arrival of 7 of his courtiers riding 7 other corgis, drawing chariots heaped over with succulent sweetmeats, jars of wine, and golden goblets and napkin rings and towel warmers for the Celtic bride and groom. Fine hunting kestrels and spectacular helmets were dished out like after-dinner mints. The little folk made the wedding reception swing like everybody's business, providing their own magical grooves, making the mead flow and forever topping up the buffet. In fact, they rather put the mother of the bride's nose out of joint, but soon she was getting her knees up with the rest of them. They groaned at the best man's speech and wept at the touching messages from relatives who couldn't make it, and as dawn broke, they all rode back to Gwyn ap Nudd's underworld kingdom with a bevy of barks. "Ha ha! See you at my wedding then, King Herla! Congratulations!" Gwyn cried on the air, and he was away. Now, as usual, King Herla and his 6 mates were out hunting anything they fancied around 1 year later, when an arrow thudded into an oak right behind Herla's right ear, and there attached to it was an invitation. "King Gwyn ap Nudd and Queen Mab cordially invite King Herla, Queen Sheila, and their Celtic chums in their loving union in the underworld. Saturday, the 5th of 6 moon this year. We have enough toasters, but please do contribute to the Lame Corgi Society on our behalf." King Herla was just trying to remember what the day's date was and whether he really wanted to sit through a wedding in the underworld when a familiar wee bellow rang out. "No need to RSVP, King Herla. Trot right this way." And there, astride the faithful Dornach, was King Gwyn, resplendent in his wedding finery, flashing his broad grin. He gee'd up the little dog and padded away towards the nearest green hill. Hello, yes," Herla stammered. It's just, you see, I got this battle coming up on Monday, you see, and Sheila..." His voice pattered out as he realised that the little fairy king was not listening, and with a shrug to his cohorts, Herla set off after King Gwyn with resignation. He didn't have a wedding present even. Maybe the baby badger they'd skewered as the sum total of that day's hunting would have to do as a kind of footstool or something like that. Herla was still muttering to himself as he realised that the hill had flapped open like a tent in the wind, revealing a cobbled ancient track deep, deep downwards into the earth. They followed on, and all hissed in suspicion as suddenly everything was black. "Oh, hang on, just fixing the lighting through this stretch. Follow the woofs. Woof, woof, woof," Gwyn yelled back, and so the Celts did as told, and soon pinpoints of golden light began appearing in the darkness, swaying with a muted music which astounded the above-ground mob. The lights grew and merged until the tunnel finally opened out in the eerie pastures of Gwyn ap Nudd's Middle Earth. After they'd got a few horns of some kind of fizzy nectar down them, Herla and his huntsmen decided to make the most of the situation and party like it was 9.99. It was like a second stag night for Herla, and he and his mates chowed down on all the usual grub they could, and all the unusual grub as well, and danced to the unfamiliar tunes. They groaned at the speech by the best man, or rather best centaur in this case, which was full of unwise gags about Gwyn ap Nudd's bachelor days, and the mead and the maidens and so on, causing all sorts of kerfuffle over on Gwyn's new in-laws table. Anyway, they laughed at the messages from fauns and dragons who couldn't make it to the wedding. They jived for 3 whole days away in the end, and though Mab had been less than impressed with the dead badger as a present, Herla's entourage decided that as these underworld royals had everything they needed and more, they wouldn't miss the odd golden goblet or precious emerald smuggled away in their pants. The Celtic wedding guests positively clanked as they set off on the next dawn to find their way up to the upper earth and their own Wye Valley. They had no idea where the tunnel they took opened up, but they'd make a day of it, do some hunting, and surely be home by tea time. They'd bagged several smaller dragons and a white hart before they realised it was going to be harder to escape this eerie fairyland than they had presumed, and they were just thundering down another glistening rainbow canyon when a familiar corgi's bark brought their horses to a canter. Ow, 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 ow. All except for Herla's horse, of course, which bridled in fright and twanged the king into a ruby fountain. "Whoa there, brother!" Gwyn cried, and helped Herla out of the gloopy but delicious custard which gathered at the base of the fountain. He put an arm around his boorish guest and whispered, "You know, we would have given you the goblets and such like had you asked. We had a gorgeous goodie bag lined up for all of you. But now several of my wizards are determined to enact some kind of justice on your dawn flit, Herla. Look, here's the door," he gestured, and a nearby hill flapped open. "You lot just gallop away through there and home you'll be. But despite everything, I do still want to give you some chance. Take this, brother. May it serve you well. Gwynap Nuv whistled, and a droopy little bloodhound padded up, heavy red-veined eyes gazing up at King Herla, where he now sat, back up in his sticky saddle. It was a look mournful enough to break the heart of a boulder, and Herla accepted the dog up onto his lap with a face like sour milk. Kenny here must be protected as you travel up to your white skies, King Herla. Things may seem unusual to you after the party we've had, but just let this good boy— Yes, you are, Kenny. Yes, you are. You're a very good boy. Don't look at me like that. Just let Kenny jump down from your saddle first, and all should be well that ends well. Take care, brother. Ha! And with a bark, he galloped away. When Herla and his huntsmen emerged back through the hill from where they left just 3 days earlier, they experienced what I'm deciding to call the ultimate Monday morning feeling. King Herla groaned. Sheila was just going to pulverize him. They trotted towards the forest where they hunted, but somehow the forest was no longer there, just fields and little houses dotted around. On the banks of the River Wye, from where Herla could usually look up the hill to his own castle, he saw what seemed to him a very weird bloke indeed. This bloke was wearing unusual trousers and a yellow beard and driving a big metal plough through the turf. "You there, yellowy peasant! What have you done with the castle of King Herla?" the confused monarch cried. "Do what, mate?" replied the ploughman, only in some gobbledygook of a language which sounded German to Herla and his friends. "What country have you come from?" Herla demanded. "You're sure as Herla not from round here, mate, are you?" "What are you, Welsh or something?" replied the ploughman, perplexed. Luckily, there was a local, wizened old Welsh witch called Illid, who managed to translate for the startled horseman. "You say you are King Herla of the Britons?" the sweet old lady crowed. "Ha, ha, ha! I must say, you don't look 1,000 years old, Cariad." "Never mind this tot," Herla demanded. "What have you done with Queen Sheila?" Now, I do remember talk of a Queen Sheila," the witch mused. "But she was a queen of legend centuries ago, perhaps some kind of Celtic goddess of a local tribe, if she existed at all." "Why is everyone here so blonde?" "Blonde? Oh, my dear lad, what stone have you been hiding under? It's 7 generations at least since the Saxons took hold of these lands. All of them, right up to the walls and the dikes." "The whats and the whats?" Oh, the witch laughed and sighed and looked at him with pity. "Oh, my dear boy, it's now something like the year of the new Lord 667. These numbers meant nothing to Herla's mob, but they began to mutter between themselves as a very sinking feeling set in that their lost weekend was proving to have a far heavier toll than just a creeping hangover. "King Herla, this cannot be," thundered Lord Basil, usually the quietest of the entourage. "We must have taken a wrong turning in the Fairyland tunnels." The witch translated to the ploughman and a growing throng of Anglo-Saxons. They were all roaring with laughter. "Right, I'll have you lot for that," shouted Basil, and leapt down from his saddle to draw his sword. With a gruesome yell, Basil disintegrated into a grey dust, his skeleton looking understandably surprised as it crumbled down into atoms. "No, they got Basil, you buggers!" cried Lord Dwayne, his best friend, and similarly leapt out of his saddle in a shower of dust. "Oh, God, stop bursting into clouds of dust!" Herla roared. "I remember this bloody dog! You, Kenny, please will you just pop down there on the floor for us? Go on, be a good dog, only for a sec." Kenny the bloodhound looked down at the ground, and he looked up at King Herla with those big, brown, red-tinged eyes, and he let out a little whine. "Oh, go on, please," Herla begged, but Kenny stayed put, and no amount of pushing or pulling would get him down on the ground. By now, the Saxon crowds had mainly drifted away for their teas, though Illid was still laughing, and King Herla and his remaining posse of 5 just kept on riding up and down the banks of the River Wye, sure that their kingdom must be just around the next bend. It may have been days later, it may have been centuries, but at last a familiar bark told them that their underworld host wanted a word. "Bit of a nasty business, that, wasn't it?" Look, see you, brother. Had you left after breakfast, I would have been able to lead you through the right tunnel to your right time. But now, as you should surely at least have guessed, your time is just dust. But as that makes you officially unemployed as a king, why don't you lads join my operation? The Wild Hunt, we calls it. Well, we do love hunting, Herla admitted. What would we be after then? Oh, you know, not the typical stuff you like. Stags, does, hares, and baby badgers and all that. No, we hunt after those who deserve to be hunted. And Gwynapnuv smiled that broad smile again, and he whistled. And the corgi barked. And King Herla and his so-called Celtic chums were led up into the gloomy sky and away from the banks of the River Wye forever. The end.